This is a perfect organization run by imperfect men. There are various occasions where this line or a variation of it will come up, typically during a conversation regarding a topic like new light, failed predictions, or the organization's problem with child abuse. Usually, at the beginning of the argument, a witness will try to minimize the issues at hand or even deny that this was the teaching or that the problem actually exists. Then, once they come to realize that you can prove those issues to them using actual evidence with sources inside and outside the organization, they will then jump to the excuse of, well, they're just imperfect men. To a witness, this sounds like a perfectly reasonable excuse since, after all, no one is perfect and every person, including true Christians, make mistakes. However, this argument falls flat on its face if you break it apart for them and highlight the problems with it. As I mentioned before, this excuse is used to absolve the organization of any responsibility from their previous mistakes and policies, including their disastrous ones related to their handling of child abuse. Would a witness accept this as a valid excuse when a member of the Catholic Church or a Southern Baptist church uses it? I know I say this all the time, but it's a critical argument that you need to bring up with witnesses when discussing this because they know they have criticized other churches for their policies. When they become aware of the fact that the organization does the same thing, it completely destroys their credibility and highlights the hypocrisy in using the argument of imperfect men. There is a major problem in claiming that the Holy Spirit appoints elders in the congregation and then come to the realization that predators have actually been appointed as elders who then abuse that authority to victimize others. What witnesses tend to do at this point is to use a straw man argument to try to skirt around the actual issue. They'll say, well, it isn't the organization's fault that an elder decides to do something bad. There were plenty of men in the Bible who did bad things after they were selected by Jehovah for a certain position. Don't let this argument throw you off. Gently point out that this is a straw man argument and then clarify for them what the real problem is. The issue isn't what someone does after they've been appointed by Holy Spirit. We recognize that as a result of God giving everyone free will, they can do whatever they want. However, the real issue is that there have been many men who were appointed as elders or servants, and it later came to light that these men had been abusers before their appointment and continued that abuse afterward. This means that the Holy Spirit appointed the abuser to a position of leadership in the organization, one that requires trust and obedience of the publishers in the congregation. Give the witness the following task. Have them go throughout the Bible and find an example of a person who was appointed directly by God or the Holy Spirit when they did not qualify for that role at that time. Sure, you have plenty of examples of men who made major mistakes, like Moses, Saul, and David, but at the time of their appointment, they fully qualified for that role. They didn't have hidden sins that God somehow didn't catch. It was only after being appointed in those roles that they made their mistakes. Considering this, shouldn't God's one true organization be better than all the other religions in this regard and stand out as different? This leads to another glaring issue with the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses. One of the key points that's brought out in the publications is that you can trust the Bible because it doesn't hide the mistakes of the men and the women in the Bible. Their faults and their sins were on public display. Their honesty in recording these matters shows their humility and that they could be trusted. This pattern of honesty with their mistakes is not something that has been adopted by the faithful and discreet slave. A witness will try to point to the fact that there is a beliefs clarified section on their website, which proves that they're honest about their mistakes. This is a bit of a misdirection. When you go through these beliefs clarified, you'll see that when they update a teaching, they don't apologize for teaching the wrong thing. They do not ever acknowledge that they were teaching false doctrine. Instead, what they do is use a cop-out excuse like, Jehovah never said the slave would produce perfect food, or that he reveals things in his own due time, or that Jehovah has shown more light on the issue. And typically, they'll finish out the thought with something like, Aren't we so happy to be part of the one true organization that Jehovah is using to provide food at the proper time? They should not be able to demand absolute obedience, especially when they change their doctrine constantly. Their policies and doctrine have actively ruined lives. The stances on acceptable blood components since 1945 have literally ended lives. Do they apologize to those families for their loved ones who have died for refusing certain components when they could have later accepted them when the doctrine changed? No. The rules used to state that if your spouse committed adultery with another person of the same sex, or even an animal, that you were not scripturally free to remarry since it was not possible for those two to become one flesh. When they finally updated that policy, did they offer a heartfelt apology to all of those innocent mates for forcing them to stay in those relationships, or for wrongly disfellowshipping people for rejecting that stand and getting remarried anyway? No. Or what about those who were called up in a military draft and had to make the difficult decision to choose between going to jail or doing alternative civilian service? Many chose to go to jail, taking away years out of their lives, leaving them with a stain on their public record, all because it was not allowed by the Watchtower Society. Did they then apologize to those men when, in 1996, they changed that stance and allowed it? No. In fact, they actually blamed those men for having consciences that were too strong. Feel free to pause here and read what they actually put into print to try and absolve themselves from any responsibility. The governing body has the ability to change any doctrine and even flip-flop back and forth between teachings with no accountability. You would be viewed as having apostate thinking if you stuck to an old understanding. If you held to that old belief and actually voiced your disagreement with the change in teaching, then you would be disfellowshipped for causing divisions. As long as they can use that tagline of new light, combined with their policies of strict obedience enforced by the threat of shunning, they have the power to do anything that they want. There are so many excuses and canned lines that you come across as a witness, each of them designed to make you look the other way. You may have heard the line, Jehovah can bless a bad decision, implying that even if a wrong decision was made and there were consequences for it, you still need to try to find anything positive that came from it so you can still say that Jehovah blessed it. No matter what, you are supposed to go along with it and obey. The real reason this excuse is used is because it is a fantastic way to essentially tell someone to ignore the problem and at the same time instill strict obedience to the governing body. The culture and doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses is that the governing body must be obeyed as if their words were coming from Jehovah himself, essentially placing themselves in the position of God and then demanding that same level of unquestioning obedience. As you can expect, a witness will try to deny this. If you need some examples of how this teaching goes way back, then take note of the following examples. The Watchtower claims to contain God's opinions, not those of men. This is from the 1931 Watchtower, November 1st, page 327. The Watchtower is not the instrument of any man or set of men, nor is it published according to the whims of men. No man's opinion is expressed in the Watchtower. God feeds his own people, and surely God uses those who love and serve him according to his own will. Those who oppose the Watchtower are not capable of discerning the truth that God is giving to the children of his organization, and this is the very strongest proof that such opposers are not of God's organization. Then check out the 1957 Watchtower, June 15th, page 370. It is vital that we appreciate this fact and respond to the directions of the slave as we would to the voice of God, because it is his provision. A witness will try to claim that these are old articles and don't apply. So then you can show them that this doctrine hasn't changed, and in reality, every witness knows this. Following the direction of the organization is akin to following Jehovah himself and is a requirement for salvation. Notice the 2014 Watchtower, October 15, pages 24 to 25. Faithful servants of Jehovah have always been eager to submit to theocratic direction. We may initially lack full understanding of the reasons for carrying out our assigned work in a particular way, Nevertheless, we are fully aware of the benefits of cooperating with Jehovah in any adjustment that he sees fit to make. Then bounce over to the 2014 Watchtower, August 15, page 21. Today, Jehovah guides his people by means of the Bible, his Holy Spirit, and the congregation. The guidance that we receive from him is so clear that it is as if our own ears hear a word behind us saying, "This is the way, walk in it." In effect, Jesus also conveys Jehovah's voice to us as he directs the congregation through the faithful and discreet slave. We need to take this guidance and direction seriously, for our everlasting life depends on our obedience. What's great is, now that the governing body is placing themselves front and center on camera, we can hear it directly from their own mouths how they elevate their own teachings and claim they're from God. Check out what Samuel Hurd said during the 2021 annual meeting in a talk entitled, "I Will Never Abandon You."
But as we understand it, some things Jehovah will not permit us to see, even though we read over it many, many times. We can't see it until Jehovah puts the light on it. And what I'm about to reveal to you today, Jehovah is behind it. Not the governing body, not any human here on the earth, but Jehovah God. He helps us to see things.
Here, a governing body member is bold enough to say that the new light they received are the words of Jehovah, not the words of the governing body. The odd contradiction that comes to mind when making a statement like this is the fact that witnesses will claim that the governing body are not inspired, that they don't receive revelations of new light in this manner. It isn't wrong for the governing body to admit to not being inspired and having made errors. It's wrong to make such an admission and then enforce strict adherence to their own direction by claiming that they alone speak for Jehovah. Here's a nice infographic from JW Facts that you might want to have stored away for when this argument is brought up. This shows a nice logical progression of questions to ask, where the end result shows the problems of claiming to have God's direction and new light while trying to claim that you are imperfect, yet receiving your direction directly from God. So Jesus directs the governing body. How? Does he talk to them? Well, not directly, but through the Bible and the Holy Spirit. Why then have there been wrong Watchtower teachings requiring change? The governing body, they're neither perfect or infallible. Is the Bible wrong because its writers were neither imperfect nor infallible? This idea of imperfect men making horrible mistakes and obeying them no matter what goes directly in conflict with another idea presented in the publications and Bible accounts. They highlight the fact that God will even remove his spirit from an entire congregation if those taking the lead are not doing as they should. In the Bible, thousands upon thousands suffered for following the directions of men who were taking the lead but were disobeying Jehovah. The organization likes to point the finger at every other religion in the world and remind you that if you stay in a religion that has any false doctrine or hypocrisy in leadership, then you share along in their sins and will be judged accordingly. They mention what's said in Revelation chapter 18, verse 4 regarding Babylon the Great, which says, "Get out of her, my people, if you do not want to share with her in her sins, and if you do not want to receive part of her plagues." In the end, you'll likely find out that a witness just doesn't care about the truthfulness of their doctrine, the history of their religion, nor of the hypocrisy in leadership. The conversation may end with another typical canned response. Well, we just need to have faith and leave it in Jehovah's hands. Basically meaning to bury your head in the sand and pretend that everything's okay. They're taught to obey no matter what because their salvation is linked to it. They may also be too afraid to peek behind that curtain and see what's really going on. No one likes to find out that a cherished belief is wrong. Sometimes it can be just too uncomfortable to consider the facts. However, Jehovah's Witnesses certainly aren't immune to the effects of cognitive dissonance, and it may very well be that if you handle yourself well in these conversations, treating them as gently and kindly as possible, you can plant a seed of doubt that grows large enough to help get them out. Hope this helps.